Welcome to the February 20th Government Operations Committee. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 1:10. Sorry, I'm out of breath because I'm upstairs. Too much. Too much. All right. Let's see what we have today. Thank you for sending out the meeting minutes for my last meeting. I looked over it. I don't see any additions or edits.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
January 23rd meeting minutes approved. Now we get into the business. Yeah. At our last meeting, we had talked about some alleyways and right-of-ways. So, Josh or Stephen, want to kick it off?
Yeah, so I'll introduce the topic. We received feedback from the GOC at the last month's meeting related to evaluating a process for the assumption of maintenance for actively used bike or pedestrian easements. And so the feedback we got from y'all was to focus in on the public pedestrian connectors. And so what Stephen and Bruce did, and Bruce couldn't be with us today, so Brad's here. What Stephen and Bruce did was they tried to focus in that and draft a policy. I emailed this to y'all last week, but Stephen's here and he's going to walk y'all through it. He also has some examples of what alleys this might impact, just to encourage the conversation. So staff is here to talk through the policy and answer any questions that y'all have.
Great. Thanks, Josh. Yeah, so really it helped a lot getting the clarification on the definition of what we wanted to do. Remember last time I think I showed you we had 800 alleys to start the talk with, and now we're down to 7. So it's a whole lot easier to deal with 7 than 800. So I did want to make sure, looking through the policy, that it meets the criteria y'all talked about before. It certainly narrows the scope. We really talked about open, improved connectors, right? That's what we're looking at, and that's what got us down to 7. I can talk through what those are or where those are, but really, maybe it's better to just, if there's any lines of this policy that y'all had issue or question on, maybe we could talk through it that way as well.
I think the policy hits on everything that I was concerned about, but yeah. I guess Exhibit A I didn't see, but
I think that's the map, but it really gets us down to, honestly, it says 7 up there. 3 of those are Barber, and Barber. They're all the same one. So it's really down to 5. Okay. And as I remember, y'all wanted to start this with, someone has to show that there's a demand for it first, right? So 3 or 4 of these, I don't even think that people are going to bring this up as a request. I think this gets down to the 5 Points Alley and maybe one other.
And the 110 Middle Terrace is the Pars Alley.
That's the
Parza.
Right.
Parza.
And I need to print more of these. This is just sort of talking points on those, but it's the same as what's up on the map.
Because I agree with you. I don't know about the other ones, but I do know that one will generate a lot of discussion.
All righty. So our next step as a body is to move this to the Mayor Commission for a full vote. I looked over the weekend and how do y'all feel?
I make a motion to move it forward to a vote of the commission.
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
I have it.
The only question I have for follow-up is, are y'all done with the topic? You just want to focus on this area and kind of close out everything else?
Yes.
Is that what, just to make sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
We can talk about alleys for months if you want to.
Exactly. And I guess the only thing, I guess I should say before vote, the only thing is, we talked about the size, who owns the alley? Is it the owners or Athens-Clarke County government? So if we own the alleys, we're responsible for making sure that it stays clean. And
so specific to this policy, these are going to be alleys where the people would have to completely quit claim their ownership.
Right. I'm saying that.
Get started. Right. There's a lot of other alleys out there that are just in the weeds as far as ownership, but this would be very specific to those that would clearly be owned by Clarke County after the process was complete.
Okay.
And it's my understanding too that once that process goes through, it's almost like this goes to the commission. Then there's another step to where we do accept a quit claim, and then there's probably another step to where we vote to do whatever improvements needed if that's the case.
That's right. All right, we'll close out this topic and I'll pull together a GOC report for the chair.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, we're moving on to Peace Talk. Probably known as PNCOB. I invited Cassie here. She's the chair of Peace Calm, to give us an overview of the work that they have been doing over the past year. And Cassie, if you'd like to present, introduce yourself.
Well, hello, everybody. My name is Cassie Evans. You probably have received an email from me regarding the information that we're going to go over today, which is the bylaws and the job description, more so the job description. Peace God, we've been training since April of 2022, if I'm not mistaken. And in that time, we have worked with NACL, the National Association of Civilian Oversight. So a lot of the preferences and recommendations that we have in the job descriptions comes directly from that training. Has everybody had a chance to go over the job description?
Yes.
The thing that I would like to highlight the most, because we briefly talked about it at our last meeting, because Dexter Fisher is now ex officio of the Public Safety Civilian Oversight Board, was the preference regarding the prior affiliation to ACCPD. There was a mention at that meeting that preference may be removed. I just would like to advocate for that preference in this moment. And just say that the reason for this is simply the matter of independence from the department that we will be overseeing. So we just deeply believe that if the person has no prior affiliation with ACCPD, that will help with transparency with us to the general public, which is the entirety of the reason that we exist, is to be that transparency to the general public. At this time, really, I feel like all of the information is before you. And since I'm here, I will open it up for any questions that you may have for the board.
Well, so we'll bring discussion back to the table. Are there any comments?
I guess I have a question. I was part of and you were too, Commissioner Davenport, about the government operations that form this committee. And I still am wondering, what are the, because at the time, Josh, if you remember, we were struggling with what the need was, and because we weren't getting that many complaints within the police department and so forth, and where the position would be housed and such as that. Commissioner Spencer, has that discussion happened on the?
Yeah, we talked about it last piece. Well, one thing I mentioned was that maybe other duties might be sent into the monitor position based on the number of complaints. Now, if there's hundreds of complaints for those 4 agencies, then I can see the need for this monitor to be very, very busy taking in complaints. But that was my only concern, was would there be enough complaints out there for the 4 agencies, for the monitor to really have a full-time job to do that job that you all want to have done. So I don't know that. I have not seen any of the complaints, at least I personally. So if those complaints are out there, I would like, because I'm a data guy, and if there's complaints out there and we got issues, then we need to deal with those issues and move forward with that and get those things corrected.
Well, thank you for saying I'm also a data guy, if we would say. So I'm big into the research. So how Peace Corps was formed in the beginning anyway, in 2018, 2019, various community members and local advocacy groups became highly concerned about what they consider a misuse of police force, ICE raids, and a rising rates of Black and brown people being incarcerated. For example, the 2018 incident with Officer Taylor Salter, him being fired, showing him hitting a fleeing suspect with his vehicle. In 2018, an officer forcefully restrained a 10-year-old over his father's arrest. And in 2019, there were 6.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. But just a high level overview, can we get data from the police department? How many complaints annually?
Well, they reported to us during training that there were 7 complaints. So with AADM being an advocacy group also is accepting complaints, they are reporting that they're receiving weekly complaints.
Okay.
So there's a discrepancy there with what is actually going to the police department and what's going to the local advocacy groups.
Okay.
And I believe that Peace Cop can be a middle, like, liaison between that, because there's clearly people aren't feeling the freedom to go to the police department regarding these complaints.
Okay.
So maybe if there's more transparency there, then they will receive more complaints.
Okay.
So to that point though, if, those complaints are out there though, why let those fester? That's my concern. Why let those complaints fester? Where if we need to make those investigations, start looking into these incidents, then I feel like we holding information out.
Well, we're not letting them fester. They're going to the groups, and there's no group to pass it along to the police department. Is what I'm saying.
In my opinion, then the group then need to share enough information then, so we can go ahead and move forward. Like you said, you want transparency. So those things are out there, then we didn't know them.
Right, and that's the purpose of Peace Cop, and we want to know about it too, and we want to make sure those complaints are going to the police department, and that is what we believe will be the benefit of the board and the benefit of having a monitor that has no prior affiliation with ACCPD.
Okay, so the question on the floor, is the need. So can Salters or Brinkley, give us statistics, data, numbers of public complaints that reach our office annually or on average?
And I think what we probably could do, is bring that data to the next meeting.
Okay.
I know the police department presented that when GOC first talked about this. I know they presented that same data to Peace Cop as Peace Cop developed their recommendations. And, I don't think you probably brought the exact number with you today. You might know off the top of your head though.
Yeah, I can give them, that was, last year's number was total 7 complaints. We are average around 110, 120,000 calls per service. And each complaint we receive goes through our internal affairs unit, which is headed up by Lieutenant Hurd. Every complaint gets investigated, of course, review a body cam, everything else. And, we're going to hold folks accountable if we're wrong. And if not, we'll bring folks in and try to get a better understanding.
And Deputy Chief Daniel was at the last Peace Cop meeting, and this idea of who gets the complaints came up. And what he emphasized and what Sherry and I are going to continue to emphasize is that the police department or whatever public safety agency the complaint is about, we need to forward them the complaints as soon as we get them, because they want to review them, they want to investigate them, they want to make sure that they're being transparent and actually taking care of things. And so if there's other groups receiving complaints, they're not getting forwarded, then we're not able to really turn around and be transparent and make sure we're not doing things that some people say we are. So that's a big concern, I think, of the public safety agencies.
One of the things, we're a CLIA accredited agency, nationally accredited. We have to report our numbers. They look at every one of our complaints also. And then all of our complaints with the findings are also put on our transparency website. So we share that data with the public, and also, again, all of our numbers have to go on front CLIA numbers every year.
I'm sorry, excuse me, I'm sorry I have to repeat yourself, just in case somebody who have not seen this or heard you before. So you may hear me ask repetitive question, but just for, the listening audience who may not have heard it before. But, Commissioner, how we got?
Sure, thank you, Cassie, for being here today. Appreciate that, and appreciate putting this together. I do have a question about the monitor position, not besides the workload, but was there any suggestion from Peace Cop about where it would be, if there were a position, where it would be housed? And I asked that because, as Patrick remembers, we had a lot of discussion about that. So, is it under the manager's office? Is it under an auditor's position, or where? So, if there were a position, where would it be? Who would hire them? Who would oversee it?
So ultimately, that will be our decision. But Peace Cop,
is there a recommendation?
They recommended it be under the Office of Operational Analysis.
Right.
Okay.
And Sherry would like to explain that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the fundamental explanation is that the general process is that any new department should go under the manager's office. Like that is the default. So I don't mean should as in like a judgment, like a good versus bad. I mean, procedurally, it's hard to create sort of independent entities because the only sort of independent entities that exist are charter officers. So by definition, the only way to create those is to amend the charter, which is a whole other process. So, you know, when we created the Office of Inclusion, that is under the manager's office. The original task force that was tasked with living this didn't feel comfortable with having PSCOB or like kind of a monitor or auditor monitor under the manager's office because they wanted a level of independence. And so the recommendation as sort of a compromise has been to put it under the auditor. And when we say put it under the auditor, I realize that I'm actually not being precise enough. What I mean there is that we cannot create sort of a sub office under the auditor in the same way that, you know, Attorney Drake can't create a sub office under him to do other kind of work. So the way it would have to work to avoid a charter amendment is that the ordinance, which is what actually determines what the internal auditor's duties are, would have to be amended to add this duty to that person. So whoever gets hired as the internal auditor, this would be their role. Now, they could have staff that support them in that role, and they may delegate like attendance at certain meetings, just like Judd delegates currently the GOC to us. But at the end of the day, the auditor would have to be the one responsible for this role. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so she explained that at December's meeting. So I hope, did y'all catch that?
I did,
Okay.
you know, but actually, I kind of agree with Peace Corps that the position may need to be on the audit because of the data that this position will be collecting, and that's what some of the auditor position do. They go and look at different departments and analyze what they're doing and bringing that information back sometime to the mayor commission. So I have no problem with it, unless not if we got to do a constitutional amendment, and that may be a different story. But I have no problem with the monitor position going on the auditors.
Now, did Peace Corps were they able to settle the issue? I remember in government ops that you raised a few times about due process and, you know, investigations that may be ongoing in the police department.
Mm-hmm.
How that may present not a conflict, but something to work around maybe or something.
We've certainly discussed it, the challenge primarily being an Open Records Act issue in the sense that obviously we don't want to imperil pending investigations, but Peace Corps may want to have access to certain things that are happening. And so I think that is primarily the solution that we're hoping will work is whoever is kind of assigned that role, whether it's ultimately the internal auditor themselves who takes that on, whether it's a lower level employee who kind of fulfills that role for them, but that person would have a good relationship with the police department and these other entities. So the police department may be able to call that person in to observe things, to read things that are in the police department, but not to take things. Because once that person has possession of physical records, whether that's video, audio, written reports, notes that they took themselves, those become open records. And the problem is that while there are exceptions for the district attorney's office, for the police department that allow us to retain those while the prosecutor is pending, there's no such exception for a body like this. So that whoever is fulfilling that role would have to be extremely careful in how they conduct their business and how they communicate with Peace Corps. And again, that's not because we're trying to hide the ball. It's just because we want to make sure we don't undermine ongoing investigations.
So, and that's where my mind gets funky in that. So if Peace Corps as a group is getting complaints from the public, it should be the auditor monitor who should be following that information, should be handling that information because of correct?
Well, so just a couple things here. So first of all, the ordinance that we shared with y'all that you created to create this committee, it's not an investigative committee.
Yeah.
And so no one of the committee nor the monitor or auditor should be doing an investigation. That's for the public safety agency. So if they were to receive a complaint, they should forward it to the necessary public safety agency. The other thing I would say is related to what Sherry shared was, since there is not currently this position, Peace Corps is not able to conduct any of the work that would be associated with with a complaint. So they're in a position right now without the monitor where they're doing other things until this position's approved.
So how much what's the salary? What are we looking at for salary?
I don't know, because first of all, I think we gotta get an auditor hired.
Yeah.
That's the first, if it's gonna go in the auditor position, but get that person hired first. I met with the mayor last week. The position's supposed to be posted, and we're gonna start doing interviews probably in March sometime. So that's number one, we gotta get an auditor hired. And then we'll get
The
that-
mayor mentioned it coming out of a $200,000 budget, but that was including the auditor budget too. So that's not to say whatever the budget will be for the actual monitor.
And so,
Do y'all feel like there's enough workload? If there's only
That was my question.
7 complaints, does Peace Corps have it? I mean, I could see a lot of community outreach and stuff like that.
I think when HR looked at this, they tied it to potentially like an attorney 1 or 2 position.
Okay.
But what HR hasn't done yet, to answer your question, Commissioner, is graded out. So what HR is going to do is they're going to wait till y'all have made your formal request. And when Jeff Hale came and talked with Peace Corps, he did share it's probably in line with like an attorney 1 or 2. But what the bottom of the salary range is for that, I don't know off the top of my head. But that's the general comparison. Could be a management analyst too, but I think he's thinking attorney because there's a lot of legal aspects to this position.
because all we're doing though is just adding a duty to the Office of Operational Analysis.
Right.
So whoever's hired in that position, they can take on these duties, or they can hire somebody else.
I'm just wondering what the next steps are. If that's the case, then we can make a motion today just to say,
Well, what I would say is there 3 vacancies in that office. There's an auditor, there's 2 other positions. Those 2 other positions are not attorney positions, right? And so that's what I would say is there might need to be a need, if you're going to keep the current number of positions in operational analysis, we would have to reclass one of those positions. But somebody's got to do the work.
I guess I was looking at the new budget cycle coming up, not through this budget cycle.
Okay.
So, and to stay ahead of the new budget cycle coming up, that's what I was wondering, if we just need to go ahead and do something today to get that baked in.
And it also I just want to bring up the point where it won't just be complaints that we're receiving. We also have other functions as a board as far as like conducting research and asking for specific information. And the monitor would be a part of that process, with being the liaison from the police department with that information back to us in order for us to present it to the public.
And I think to answer your question about the budget, I think if what GOC is saying is we see the same number of overall positions in operational analysis, there will just be new work assigned, then we could budget accordingly in the next budget year. But if it's a different type of position, if it's, I think that's the kind of information we need, and a start date and that kind of information so that we can bring back numbers.
Yeah, man, because you guys, I'm new to the party.
Yeah.
So you guys, both of y'all was on GLC. So last year, what was the discussion for is moving forward?
Well, we've shoved it back on the Peace Corps to get them to give us a recommendation.
Okay.
But it was brought up as being in the auditors realm, but absent an auditor, I guess I hear what you're saying. We need to, I don't know, what are you saying?
Well, so the auditor has all sorts of other duties too, right? So to Sherry's point, the auditor might be charged with making sure the work gets done. But the auditor might come to Peace Corps meetings, but the work might not be able to be handled by the auditor, so they're going to delegate it. Right now, who are they going to delegate it to? There's 2 vacant positions. And so if you hire the auditor and then give them the opportunity to reclass their positions, they might do that. Or you could create a recommendation related to the vacant positions, right? So, and that might be something you want to consider. Is maybe creating some flexibility so before the auditor gets hired, they know they're walking in and have the ability to hire an attorney 1 to help support Peace Corps.
That's what we want to do.
Right. So can I ask Sherry a question here? So I want to make sure I'm clear. If we want to put this monitor position, already got 2 other positions, but we want to add do we have to do anything with the charter in order to make that happen?
No, you don't, but I do want to be really careful in how we think about the auditor monitor title. Like I just can't emphasize enough. I think that needs to be with the auditor.
Right.
She or he will have some low level position, whatever we call it, but the auditor monitor really needs to be the internal auditor. But to your fundamental question, no, you do not have to change the charter, excuse me, to add another position to that office to support the auditor.
Budget wise.
It's just a budget issue,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah, but and this is a total different story. I've always thought that office was understaffed, but again, that's another story.
So let's, go through the position.
Do we have to?
So, okay, I'm gonna bring it up. The last sentence of qualifications, the no prior affiliation with the Athens-Clarke County Police Department Probation Service, the Sheriff Office, or the Corrections Department.
Yeah, that one I do.
I would like to have that stricken, taken off. But that's up for discussion.
Right.
I don't have a problem. I mean, I don't have a problem with that.
But again, I need the opinion of the attorneys. I had last peace call, I did say I want the opinion of the attorney or what you all learned when I went to your training.
Well, she was there.
Okay, okay.
I wasn't actually at the last meeting, but I did watch it. So I can tell you that there's not a legal prohibition against doing that. I think you were concerned about equal protection. You're right to be concerned about that. At the same time, prior law enforcement experience is not a protected class. So I think what we talked about, with any kind of condition like this, it's ideally to put it preferred, but there's nothing wrong with saying that the person can't if they've got that background. That's a policy decision for you all to make.
And I may have a disagreement here, but if a good candidate applies for it that has that background that wants to do a good job, I could see some benefit in that, really. I mean, I don't want to not have, I just don't know why.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's up to the auditor to decide.
If I could offer something, and I think you'll remember this, and I'm not offering this to sway anything, but I just think it may be helpful. One of the presenters from NACOL, who spoke to us, shared that he had prior law enforcement experience. He's been working with NACOL ever since, I guess you may remember, Cass, I don't know if he said he retired or, but anyways, I think groups have taken it different ways. It sounds like across the country, so it's entirely up to you all as how you want to do it.
So my only concern is that because essentially this go to the operations analysis office.
Mhm.
So what if that person has former law enforcement, then they delegate to somebody else who doesn't?
That's where this gets muddy.
So that's where it gets muddy.
Yeah.
And it's not anything against the work that the Peace Corps has done. It limits the role and potential of people who we hire.
Well, and if you think about what we were just discussing, if GOC assigns the duties to the auditor, that would then apply to the auditor position,
Yeah.
right? So the auditor could hire whoever in their office to help support it. But in theory, what you're going to be looking for in an auditor is somebody that can accomplish these tasks with a team of people.
Yeah.
So are you not going to hire an auditor who has worked for a police department? That's the question.
So
But I think though, just so we be clear, I think where the scripture comes in, to no prior affiliate with ACC, probation, sheriff, or correctional department. You all are not saying that they was attached to other law enforcement.
Correct. This is a strictly.
So.
Well, I
hear you. Yeah.
I don't know if we need to limit ourselves at this juncture in that. So, because what if we have an auditor that comes from
retired.
Yeah.
That previously worked for ACPT or corrections locally.
Right.
And that could be the case. Yeah.
And I think what staff voiced was no prior affiliation, right? So that's pretty ambiguous. It could mean work. It could mean,
Contract.
yeah. So that was one of our concerns.
So, we have a consensus here.
Now, will HR come back with a description, or how's that gonna work?
So if y'all decide to continue on with it, the operational analysis, we'll have to meet with HR and ask them some of these questions, because if the auditor is assigned these responsibilities, does it change the grade of the auditor position? And then we're gonna need to consult with HR to figure out how to address what you conceive of as the FTE or full-time equivalent to do this work, if that's gonna be a current position or not in operational analysis. So once we know that, then I think HR can make some recommendations in terms of grade. But because it's gonna be an operational analysis, from what I'm hearing, it makes it a little more complicated.
So you just want us to wait on voting on anything? Is that?
I think so. Any guidance y'all want to give us on the positions and what we need HR to look at in time for the next meeting, and then we can bring data back in terms of the number of complaints as well. I think that would be helpful so that we can kind of have a discussion with HR to then bring you back something that.
So we need grade information with these, the ordinance change with the actual duties, data from our police department, and then we can move forward from there. Any other, can HR be at our next meeting?
Definitely.
Can I add something?
Yeah, go ahead.
You know, I realize it's so confusing how we're having to create this and talk about it. I think they're, in an ideal world, to make it the cleanest it could possibly be, it would be nice for, as you talked about, for this to be wrapped into the auditor's role, so that we're not actually looking at an auditor monitor position. It's just the auditor.
Yes.
And then if we're going down an attorney one track, maybe that's like attorney investigator or whatever that title is, but it's not the auditor monitor that we're talking about, because I think that creates confusion and starts to look like a sub-department has been created in violation of the charter, which I knew was not anyone's intent.
Yeah.
And this may just be semantics. It just really just gives me a little bit of
So
grief.
just to add the duties to the operational analysis office,
Mhm.
and then that position, whoever gets hired, they can take it from there.
That's possible. I just want to clarify the titles essentially.
Okay.
And we'll bring a work plan of operational analysis to the next meeting so y'all can see what number of positions are there and what they're currently assigned to do. And then maybe that'll help the conversation.
Works for me.
All righty.
Are all the commissioners here that are part of the GLC?
Except for one, she has a definite and unfortunately, Commissioner Page.
Okay.
Yeah, she's the only one, there's four of us.
All righty.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Uh,
All right, see y'all in a month.
You got a minute?
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.